The twin suns of Orion glowed softly above the crystal plains. The air shimmered with light that painted every surface in hues of blue and silver. The city of the Orin stood like a crown upon the horizon. Towers of glass and stone curved into elegant spirals. Bridges floated gently between them. Streams of glowing water ran through the streets, humming with quiet energy. The Orin people moved calmly through their world. Every motion was graceful. Every word was soft. They were beings of light and reason, living in perfect balance. Their leader, Mira, stood on the highest balcony of the Hall of Unity. Her eyes reflected the light of the suns. She was admired by her people for her calm spirit and clear mind, yet inside she felt a quiet ache. The Orin had achieved everything they had once dreamed of. Their cities were beautiful, their technology flawless, their lives peaceful, and still there was something missing. It was not something that could be measured. It was something that could only be felt. The spark that once drove them forward had dimmed. Mira had spent many cycles searching for an answer. She read the records of the old explorers. She listened to the songs of the elders. She walked through the silent gardens that once bloomed with laughter. But the answer never came. The Orin had built perfection, yet perfection had stilled their hearts. That morning, as she watched the sky from her balcony, a streak of light tore through the air. It was brighter than any comet she had seen. It moved too fast, too low. The air rippled with sound as it fell beyond the crystal hills. A soft tremor reached the city, gentle but strange. The citizens turned their eyes upward. For a moment, silence hung over Orion. Mira called for her council. "Something has entered our world," she said. Her voice was steady, but her heart beat faster. The council members bowed and began their analysis. Within moments, the city's oracles confirmed that the object was not of Orin origin. It was a vessel from the stars beyond their known borders. A ship built by another race. Mira felt a rush of curiosity. The Orin had not encountered another intelligent species for many generations. Their long-distance scanners sometimes detected signals, but contact had faded with time. She ordered a small team to accompany her to the crash site. The council hesitated, but Mira's gaze silenced their concern. "If something new has come to us," she said, "we must meet it with open eyes." The journey to the crash site took only minutes in their hovering craft. The landscape shimmered beneath them like a sea of glass. As they neared the valley, the ground bore the mark of impact, a long scar of melted crystal leading to a still-smoking ship. The craft was small and made of dull metal, unlike the radiant designs of the Orin. Steam rose from its sides. The air smelled faintly of burned fuel. Mira stepped forward. Her robe brushed the glowing dust beneath her feet. The ship's hatch creaked open. A figure stumbled out, coughing and unsteady. He was not like any being the Orin had seen before. His form was solid, his skin pale under the twin suns, his clothing torn and soot-covered. He looked fragile and strong at the same time. 2 Orin guards moved forward, but Mira raised her hand. The stranger lifted his eyes. They were tired yet alive with a spark of wonder. He looked at Mira and spoke in a language she did not understand. The sound was rough and broken, but it carried emotion, fear, relief, and hope all at once. Mira activated her translator. The device shimmered briefly, capturing his words. "I mean no harm," he said. "My name is Tom. My ship was lost in a storm of stars. I didn't mean to come here." The translator echoed the message in the soft tones of the Orin language. Mira's people looked at one another in surprise. They had heard legends of humans, a race of dreamers and explorers from a distant system, but none had seen one in thousands of years. Most believed humans were reckless and impulsive, too driven by emotion. Yet this one stood before them, humble and uncertain in a land of perfection. Mira studied him quietly. There was something in his eyes she recognized, the same longing she often felt when she looked at the empty gardens of her world. A hunger for meaning. She stepped closer and said, "You are safe on Orion. We will help you." Tom bowed slightly. His movements were clumsy compared to the fluid grace of the Orin, but sincere. He followed as they guided him into their hovercraft. Through the transparent walls he saw the city in the distance, shining towers and floating bridges that caught the sun's light like jewels. His eyes widened in wonder. "It's beautiful," he whispered. The translator echoed his words, and Mira smiled faintly. When they arrived, the citizens gathered quietly along the walkways to see the visitor. Children peered from behind the crystal pillars, whispering in awe. Tom looked around in amazement. The Oran's world seemed alive, as if every surface breathed light. Yet what caught his attention most was their stillness. No one laughed. No one hurried. Everything was calm, almost too calm. Mira led him to the Hall of Unity. There he was given clean clothing made of soft woven threads that shimmered faintly in the light. A table of fruit and warm tea awaited him. Tom thanked her, his voice gentle but filled with gratitude. He tasted the tea and smiled. "It's warm," he said. "It feels like sunlight." Mira tilted her head slightly. "We crafted it to restore calm to the heart," she said. "Do humans still seek calm?" Tom looked down at his cup and chuckled softly. "Sometimes we do, but most of the time we just try to keep going." That answer made Mira pause. "Keep going?" she asked. "Even when there is no goal?" Tom nodded. "Yes. Sometimes we walk forward just to see what's beyond the next hill." She did not understand, yet the thought stayed in her mind. For the Oran, every action had purpose. Every choice had logic. To do something without reason seemed strange, but there was something warm in his words, something that made her heart stir. Over the next few days, Tom was given quarters in the hall. He shared stories of his world. He told them about oceans that stretched forever, and skies filled with clouds that changed shape every hour. The Oran listened politely, though they struggled to imagine such chaos. Mira, however, listened closely. She found herself drawn to the way he described small things: the taste of rain, the sound of wind through trees, the joy of building something with his own hands. One morning, Mira found Tom standing by the balcony looking at the twin suns. "You have a peaceful world," he said, "but it feels quiet." "Too quiet," Mira joined him. "We have ended conflict and need. We have reached harmony. That is our greatest success." Tom nodded slowly. "Harmony is good, but sometimes a little noise helps the song feel alive." Mira smiled faintly, though she did not fully understand. Yet that night, as she walked through the silent streets, she noticed how still the city had become. The fountains whispered softly. The light drifted across the towers, but there was no laughter, no music. The peace she had once cherished now felt empty. In the days that followed, Tom began to explore the city. The Oran allowed him freedom to wander. He watched their workers craft energy crystals, their artists sculpt with light, their engineers speak in equations. Everything was perfect. But when he asked one craftsman why he built a certain design, the craftsman simply said, "Because it is the most efficient way." Tom smiled kindly and replied, "Sometimes the best way isn't the most efficient. Sometimes it's just the one that makes you smile." That evening, Mira met Tom again by the river of light that flowed through the city. "You speak with such ease," she said. "Yet your ideas unsettle my people." Tom looked at the river's glowing surface. "Maybe that's good," he said. "Sometimes a little change helps people remember who they are." Mira looked at him thoughtfully. She wondered if the humans' arrival was not an accident but something the universe had intended. Her people had forgotten how to wonder. Perhaps this lost traveler was meant to remind them. When she returned to the hall that night, she wrote a message in her personal log. "A being from a distant world has come to us by chance, yet his presence feels like a beginning. There is something in him that I do not yet understand, something alive. Perhaps the answer I have sought lies not in perfection, but in the imperfection of another kind of being." Outside, the stars of Orion shimmered brighter than usual, as if they too were listening. And in the quiet city, a single human dreamed beneath twin suns, unaware that his arrival had already begun to change the heart of an entire world. The days passed quietly in the city of Orion. The suns rose and fell across the shining towers, and the rivers of light continued their endless flow. Life went on as it always had for the Oran, but something new was beginning to stir among them. Wherever Tom walked, curiosity followed. The citizens who once moved through their routines with calm detachment now paused to watch him. They were fascinated by the way he stopped to admire the smallest things, the way sunlight scattered on crystal walls, the shapes of floating petals, or the hum of the energy bridges. Tom often carried a small notebook, though it was half burned from his crash. He used a piece of glass to carve simple drawings into its cover. He wrote down his thoughts and sketches of what he saw. The Oran found this habit unusual. They stored memories through data crystals, perfect and unchanging. Tom's pages, however, were uneven, filled with handwriting that curved and crossed itself. Mira once asked him why he used such an old method. He smiled and said, "Because I like to see the mistakes. They remind me that the moment was real." Mira thought about that answer for a long time. To the Auran, mistakes were something to be corrected. To Tom, they were part of beauty. That idea puzzled her, yet she felt drawn to it. Each morning, Mira visited Tom's quarters to observe his progress. He had been given access to their learning centers, and though he could not understand all their technology, he asked endless questions. He wanted to know how the rivers glowed, how their buildings floated, and how their language sounded like music. He was never satisfied with a simple answer. Whenever someone explained something, he would ask, "But what happens if you change it?" The Auran engineers were always startled by this question. They were not used to changing things without reason. Yet one young technician named Nira began to show him small devices and let him explore their workings. One afternoon, Tom asked if he could borrow a few scraps of material. Nira hesitated but agreed. He took small pieces of metal, a strip of cloth, and a handful of crystal dust from their labs. He worked quietly near the edge of the garden for many hours. The Auran watched from a distance, whispering to one another. When Mira arrived, she found Tom kneeling in the grass with something small in his hands. It looked like a simple wooden frame with wings made from cloth and crystal thread. "What is this?" she asked. Tom smiled and said, "It's a glider. It's not meant for travel. It's meant to fly for a moment." Mira tilted her head. "You built it without purpose?" Tom nodded. "Its purpose is to see if it can fly." Before she could respond, he lifted the little glider into the air and let it go. The wind caught it, and the small creation soared gracefully over the gardens. The Auran gasped in surprise. The glider spun once, glimmered in the sunlight, and landed softly beside a fountain. Mira stepped closer. "You spent your day building something that lasts only a few seconds in the air," she said. Tom laughed quietly. "Yes, but those few seconds were beautiful." The simplicity of his answer touched something deep inside her. The Auran had built wonders that could last centuries, yet they had forgotten how to enjoy the moment itself. For them, beauty was measured in durability and perfection. For Tom, beauty was the brief dance of wind and chance. Word of the glider spread across the city. Many Auran came to see it, curious and unsure why such a small act had made their leader thoughtful. The elders debated its meaning. Some said it was nothing more than a toy. Others whispered that it might be a message from the stars. Mira listened but remained silent. She found herself returning to the fountain again and again, watching the glider rest in the grass. Later that evening, she visited Tom again. He was sitting under the soft glow of the energy trees, writing in his notebook. "Do all humans build things like that?" she asked. He looked up with a gentle smile. "Not always. But we like to make things just to see what happens. Sometimes they fail. Sometimes they surprise us." Mira thought about his words. "You enjoy the risk of failure?" Tom nodded. "Failure teaches us something new. When we stop trying, we stop growing." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said softly, "My people do not fail anymore. We perfected our ways long ago. But perhaps in doing so, we stopped growing." The night air was still. The light from the trees shimmered across her face. Tom closed his notebook and said, "Maybe that's why I ended up here." From that day on, Mira began to observe her world with different eyes. She walked through the learning halls and noticed how the students copied ancient designs rather than creating new ones. She saw artists shaping perfect sculptures that all looked the same. The Auran had mastered repetition but not imagination. The realization saddened her. During the next council meeting, she spoke about Tom's glider. Some members found it childish. Others were uneasy. They feared that following such ideas might lead their people away from balance. Mira listened patiently and said, "Perhaps balance is not only about stillness. Perhaps it is about movement that never ends." Her words surprised the council. The elders exchanged uncertain glances. One of them, an old philosopher named Rain, said, "If we change our ways, we may lose the harmony we have kept for ages." Mira replied calmly, "If we do not change, we may lose ourselves." No one argued after that. Over the next weeks, she encouraged small experiments across the city. She asked the artists to create something new without following the old patterns. She invited children to play with shapes and colors instead of memorizing them. Slowly, the city began to shift. The once silent gardens filled with laughter as the young ones ran with their own handmade gliders. Tom watched from a distance, smiling quietly. He had not meant to change anything. He had only wanted to share a piece of the wonder he carried from his own world. But the Orin were awakening to something long forgotten. Mira often joined him during these moments. They would sit together by the glowing river, watching the small gliders drift above the water. She asked him questions about humanity, and he answered with simple stories. About how people on Earth built castles from sand knowing the waves would wash them away. About how they painted skies with colors that faded with time. About how they sang songs only to feel the joy of the moment. Each story carried warmth and imperfection. The Orin had once believed that perfection was the highest form of existence, but now Mira wondered if it was the most silent one. One day, Tom found her standing by the hall's balcony, looking over the city. "You seem lost in thought," he said. "I am thinking about my people," she replied. "We built this world to last forever. Yet forever can become a cage if we forget why we built it." Tom looked out at the towers gleaming in the light. "Maybe forever is not the goal," he said softly. "Maybe it's the journey that keeps us alive." Mira turned to him. "Journey," she repeated. "Yes, that is what we lost." We stopped walking. That night she made a decision. She gathered the council once more and spoke with conviction. "This human has reminded us of something precious. The desire to explore, to wonder, to try even when we do not know the result. We must learn from him." The council did not all agree, but Mira's presence carried quiet authority. Her words were filled with belief, not command. Slowly, the idea spread across the city. Soon, new sounds filled the streets. The hum of tools, the laughter of children, the rhythm of creation. The Orin began crafting small things not for need but for joy. Music returned to their gatherings. Color bloomed across their crystal walls. For the first time in generations, the city of Orion felt alive. Mira stood by the balcony once again as the twin suns dipped below the horizon. The rivers of light glowed in shades of violet and gold. She watched her people move through the streets with energy she had never seen before. Some still looked uncertain, but many smiled. Tom joined her quietly. "You did this," he said. Mira shook her head. "No, you showed us how to begin again." He smiled. "Then we began together." She turned to face him. "Perhaps you are right. Perhaps beginning is something we must all learn again and again." As night covered the shining city, the gliders continued to soar in the air, their wings glowing softly under the twin moons. The Orin had found wonder once more, not in perfection but in the simple beauty of trying. Mira looked at the stars and thought, "This is only the beginning." Orion shone brighter than ever under its twin suns. The rivers of light shimmered with new colors, and the air carried the soft sounds of laughter. The change was gentle but powerful. The Orin had begun to rediscover the joy of creation. They built new forms of art, experimented with sound and motion, and filled their once silent halls with curiosity. Yet not all were pleased. Deep within the Hall of Reflection, the elders of the Orin Council gathered in quiet concern. They had watched as their perfect order began to shift. The air of harmony they had guarded for generations now carried unpredictable tones. Some saw freedom, but others saw danger. Elder Rain, the oldest among them, spoke first. "Our people are losing their focus. The human's influence spreads like a song that never ends. We must ask ourselves whether this new song leads to wisdom or chaos." Several members nodded. One said, "The young have stopped following tradition. They build things without function. They laugh without reason. This is not our way." But another elder hesitated. "And yet they seem happier," she said softly. "Perhaps happiness has value too." Rain's gaze was heavy. "Happiness without purpose fades like dust. Our balance was not meant to be playful. It was meant to endure." The room grew silent. At last Mira entered. The light from the high windows followed her, casting silver patterns across the floor. She had been listening quietly outside the chamber. Her calm presence drew every eye. "I know your worries," she said gently, "but what we see is not chaos. It is rebirth." Rain turned toward her. "Rebirth can become ruin if not guided. You have allowed the human to plant seeds of uncertainty. Can you promise they will not grow into disorder?" Mira met his gaze. "I cannot promise the shape of what will come. But I can promise that life will continue to move. Stillness is the end of all things." Her words carried a quiet strength, but Rain did not yield. "Then the council must decide," he said. "Shall we let this human continue to guide us, or shall we send him away before the balance of our world fades?" The chamber filled with murmurs. Mira felt her heart tighten. She had known this moment would come. The Orin had always valued unity, and anything that stirred change was met with caution. She bowed her head and said, "Then I ask for one chance. Let the human speak before the council. Let his own words show what he intends. We owe him that much." After a long silence, Rain nodded slowly. "Very well. He may speak, but the council will decide after that." Mira thanked them and left. Later that day, she found Tom near the gardens, repairing one of the small gliders children had built. The wings had torn slightly, and he was fixing them with crystal threads. His hands were steady, his face calm. When he saw her, he smiled. "You look troubled," he said. "The council has called for a decision," she replied. "They are not sure if your presence is good for us." Tom looked down at the glider in his hands. "I see," he said softly. "Maybe I brought too much noise to your quiet world." Mira shook her head. "You brought life, but some fear what they do not understand. They will let you speak tomorrow. They want to hear from you before they decide." Tom smiled faintly. "Then I will speak. I may not know the right words, but I'll try to share what I see." That night, Mira stood by her window watching the stars. The thought of losing the human filled her with sorrow she could not explain. He had come into her world by accident, yet his presence had awakened something deep within her people. He had reminded them to feel, to dream, to wonder. She knew that if he left, that spark might fade again. When dawn came, the city gathered outside the Hall of Unity. The air was filled with quiet anticipation. The council sat upon their raised seats, surrounded by shimmering light. Mira stood beside them, calm but alert. Tom entered the chamber with simple grace. He wore the robe given to him by the Orin, though its loose folds looked almost comical on him. Still, there was dignity in his step. Rand spoke first. "Human, you have lived among us and shared your ways. You have seen our peace, yet your ideas have stirred our order. Why should we allow this change to continue?" Tom stood silently for a moment. His eyes traveled across the chamber, seeing the faces of the Orin, faces serene yet uncertain. He took a slow breath. "Your world is beautiful," he said. His voice was calm but full of feeling. "It is peaceful and wise. You have built something most of my people could only dream of. But beauty is not only in stillness. Sometimes beauty lives in the way things move and change." The translator echoed his words in the soft tones of the Orin language. The audience listened closely. "When I came here," Tom continued, "I saw a people who had reached perfection. You no longer needed to struggle, to build, or to hope. But without hope, even peace becomes heavy. My kind may not be as advanced as you, but we keep moving. We try new things even when they fail. We dream because we don't know what tomorrow will bring. That is what keeps us alive." He paused, looking at Mira. "You call it disorder, but I call it discovery." Rand's expression remained unreadable. "And what if discovery brings pain?" he asked. Tom looked at him kindly. "Then you learn. Without risk, there is no learning. Without curiosity, there is no growth. You have built a world without mistakes, but also without wonder. I didn't mean to change anything. I only wanted to share what makes us human, the courage to keep trying even when we don't know the result." The hall fell silent. Mira could feel the truth in his words like a soft pulse of light through the air. She saw the eyes of the younger Orin shining with hope. The elders looked thoughtful, not angry. Rayan leaned forward. "You speak of courage, but courage belongs to those who face danger. We have no such need here." Tom smiled gently. "Courage isn't only about danger. It's about facing uncertainty. It's about standing at the edge of the unknown and taking one small step forward." Mira could no longer stay silent. "Perhaps that is what we have forgotten," she said softly. "The courage to step forward. We have stood still for too long." Rayan turned to her. "You believe his way is better?" Mira shook her head. "Not better. Only different. But perhaps we need difference to stay alive. We do not have to become human. We only have to remember what it means to grow." The council murmured among themselves. The energy in the room changed. It was not defiance, but awakening. Rain looked at the gathered Orin, then at Mira, then finally at Tom. "You have given us much to consider," he said at last. "We will take time to reflect." Tom bowed respectfully and stepped back. Mira followed him outside. The suns were climbing higher, painting the city in golden light. The air felt lighter, as if the world itself was breathing again. "You spoke well," she said. Tom smiled. "I only spoke what I felt." They walked together through the gardens where the young Orin were now playing with their gliders. Their laughter filled the air. One of the children ran up to them and offered Tom a small crystal bird. "It flies when you sing to it," the child said. Tom looked at the delicate creation in his hand. The wings shimmered with tiny threads of light. He smiled and said, "Then I'll sing." He hummed a simple tune and the bird fluttered into the air, glowing softly. The children clapped with joy. Mira watched the scene with quiet wonder. "Do you see what has happened?" she whispered. "They are creating because they want to feel alive." Tom nodded. "That's all any of us ever want." Later that evening, the council announced its decision. The human would not be sent away. He would be allowed to stay and continue his exchange of ideas. The Orin would open new schools where both logic and imagination would be taught side by side. It was a small step, but it changed everything. Mira stood before her people that night, speaking beneath the twin moons. "We have always sought balance," she said. "Now we understand that balance is not stillness. It is movement in harmony. The human has reminded us that even light must dance to stay alive." The crowd listened in silence, then began to hum a melody. The first song sung in Orion for centuries. The sound rose through the air, gentle and pure. Tom stood among them, humbled and grateful. He had not come as a teacher, but he had become one without meaning to. Mira looked at him and knew her choice had been the right one. In choosing to let a human stay, she had chosen to let her people dream again. The night ended with laughter echoing across the crystal city. And for the first time in generations, the stars of Orion felt close enough to touch. The city of Orion was waking in a way it had not for centuries. The twin suns rose gently over the crystal towers, sending beams of golden light across the floating bridges. The rivers of luminescent water glimmered in soft blues and purples, reflecting the towers and the people moving among them. Children ran with gliders, their laughter carrying across the gardens while adults experimented with new forms of art and music. The change was quiet but undeniable. Mira walked through the streets, observing her people. She felt a warmth in her heart. The human Tom had become a symbol of curiosity and courage, but she knew that to make this transformation permanent, they needed more than inspiration. They needed a space where imagination could thrive without judgment or expectation. That morning, she invited Tom to the Hall of Unity. The halls were quiet, filled only with the soft hum of energy flowing through the walls. Tom was already there, tinkering with a small device that glowed faintly in his hands. "I have been thinking," Mira began. "Your presence has stirred much within my people. But if this is to last, we must create a place where their creativity can grow freely." Tom looked up, curiosity bright in his eyes. "A place where they can build and explore?" "Yes," Mira said. "A place where no one will judge them, where failure is allowed and curiosity is celebrated. We can call it the Dream Hall." Tom's face lit up. "I would be honored to help. But we must make it a place that feels alive, not just walls and floors, but something that responds to their imagination." Mira nodded. "That is why I have chosen you to guide this project. Not because you know more than us, but because you see what we cannot see. You remind us what it is to dream." The two of them began designing the Dream Hall together. The structure was unlike anything the Orin had built before. Its walls shifted with light. Its floors hummed softly when touched, and the air inside was scented with the flowers from the gardens outside. Spaces were designed for every kind of creation, for art, for music, for invention, for storytelling. Nothing was permanent. Everything could be changed, remade, or discarded. The children were the first to enter. Their eyes widened in wonder. Some ran to the walls, tracing their fingers across the shimmering surfaces, leaving trails of colored light. Others built towers from the glowing blocks provided, then knocked them down just to rebuild them differently. Laughter filled the hall, rich and free. Mira observed quietly, her heart swelling. The adults hesitated at first. They had been so long bound by rules and precision that the idea of making something with no purpose felt strange. But as they watched the children, something shifted. Slowly they stepped inside. One elder, traditionally known for her stern demeanor, picked up a brush that emitted a soft glow. She painted across the wall in long flowing strokes. The lines moved as if alive, changing color and shape with her motion. She laughed quietly, a sound few had ever heard from her. Tom smiled. "See, this is what happens when people remember how to play." Mira watched her people explore. Artists mixed colors and music, Engineers built devices that floated and moved in unpredictable ways, and storytellers wove tales that lit up the walls with vivid images. The Dream Hall became a living canvas of imagination, a place where creation was celebrated for its own sake, not its utility. Days turned into weeks, and the Orin began to change in ways that even Mira had not expected. Their eyes shone with curiosity. They asked questions they had never thought to ask. They tried experiments that were unnecessary but beautiful, and with each attempt, they learned not just about their world but about themselves. One afternoon, Mira walked through the hall and noticed a group of Orin working together on a large structure. It was a bridge made of light, shaped into graceful curves that twisted and turned like ribbons. The elders had never collaborated on anything so unpredictable, yet their laughter and excitement filled the hall. "You see," Tom said, standing beside her, "they are discovering joy again. They are learning that the process matters more than the result." Mira nodded. "It is more than that. They are remembering how to wonder." Even the students in the learning centers began to approach their studies differently. Instead of following rigid formulas, they asked, "What happens if we try this? Or what if we combine these two ideas?" The teachers, who had once focused on precision and repetition, now encouraged exploration. The energy of the city shifted. One day, Mira invited the council to see the Dream Hall. The elders entered with quiet skepticism. They walked through rooms filled with glowing art, floating inventions, and animated stories projected on the walls. At first, some frowned, uncomfortable with the unpredictability, but slowly their expression softened. They began to see the beauty in creation without rules. Ryan, who had once been the most cautious, reached out and touched a floating crystal. It shimmered and danced in response to his hand. For the first time in centuries, he smiled. "I understand now," he said softly. "The value is not in control but in experience. We can learn from it without losing ourselves." The council began to participate. They painted, built, and experimented alongside their people. They realized that perfection did not have to mean stillness. Growth could coexist with beauty. Meanwhile, Tom continued to teach the young ones simple ways to explore. He showed them how to build gliders, how to mix colors in new ways, and how to create music with sounds that had never been heard before. The children adored him, and even the adults began to follow his lead. One evening, as the twin sun set, Mira and Tom stood on a balcony overlooking the city. Below, the Dream Hall glowed with hundreds of lights, each representing a creation, a laugh, or a new idea. "Look at what they have become," Mira said quietly. "They just needed permission to try," Tom replied. "Your people are brilliant, Mira. They only needed to remember themselves," she smiled. "And you reminded them." "You reminded me. I thought I had forgotten too." Tom looked out at the horizon. "It is only the beginning. There are many more wonders to discover and many more ways to grow." Mira nodded. She understood that the Dream Hall was more than a building. It was a symbol of renewal, a place where her people could explore and learn without fear of judgment. And in that exploration, they would find not just joy, but wisdom. In the following weeks, the influence of the Dream Hall spread beyond its walls. People began to take ideas from the hall into the streets, into their homes, and into their work. Architects built buildings with moving walls, artists painted murals that changed with the sunlight, and storytellers shared tales that illuminated the minds of listeners. The city became alive in a new way, a balance of perfection and creativity, order and freedom. Mira often walked through the hall, watching her people experiment and play. She saw engineers laughing as they tested flying devices, children racing with glowing gliders, and elders dancing with the colors of the walls. The energy of life was everywhere. One afternoon, a young Orin approached Tom. "Can you teach me to make a glider that sings when it flies?" she asked eagerly. Tom smiled. "Of course. Let's see what we can create together." He guided her hands, showing her how to shape the wings, attach tiny sound crystals, and test the flight. When the glider lifted into the air, a gentle melody filled the room. The child clapped her hands with joy, and Mira watched from a distance, feeling a quiet pride. The success of the Dream Hall inspired new projects across Orion. Gardens were redesigned to respond to touch and sound. Buildings shifted their form with the will of those inside, and even the rivers of light began to reflect the moods of those nearby. Life became playful, experimental, and joyful, yet still harmonious. One evening, Mira and Tom sat in the quiet of the hall, watching the reflections of the twin moons on the glowing floors. "I never imagined my people could change so quickly," Mira said. "They needed a spark," Tom replied. "And sometimes all it takes is one spark to light an entire world." Mira looked at him thoughtfully. "It is more than a spark. You gave them courage. You reminded them that growth is part of life and that imperfection can be beautiful." Tom shrugged modestly. "I only shared what I know. The rest was always inside them." Mira smiled. "Yes, but you helped them remember. And sometimes remembering is the hardest part." As night fell, the city glowed softly beneath the stars. The dream hall shone brightest of all, a beacon of imagination and wonder. The laughter and music within it echoed through the streets, reaching the distant towers and bridges. For the first time in generations, Orion felt alive in a way that was unpredictable, joyful, and free. Mira knew that this was only the beginning. The dream hall was not the end of change, but the start of a journey. Her people had remembered how to wonder, how to create, and how to dream, and with Tom's guidance, that spark would grow into something even greater. The human had arrived by chance, yet his presence had transformed a world. And for Mira, for her people, and for Orion itself, the future had never looked brighter. Many cycles had passed since the dream hall first opened its shimmering doors. The city of Orion was no longer the same silent world it once had been. The twin suns rose each day over towers that now changed color with light. The rivers of energy reflected moving patterns shaped by the laughter and voices of the Orin. Everywhere one looked, there was life and creation. Children played beside artists who painted with beams of light. Engineers built floating gardens that followed the suns as they moved across the sky. Musicians filled the air with melodies that shimmered through the crystal streets. The Orin had learned to live again, to feel again, and to dream again. At the heart of it all stood Mira and Tom. Mira walked through the dream hall one morning, her steps light and thoughtful. She watched her people as they worked. A young Orin girl was designing a small machine that could fold light into different shapes. Nearby, two elders sculpted a living statue that could sing when touched. Every corner of the hall was alive with movement and joy. Tom stood at the far end teaching a group of students about aerodynamics. He held one of their new creations, a small glider shaped like a bird, and demonstrated how adjusting the wings could change its path. The students laughed and cheered when the glider looped gracefully in the air. When he saw Mira, Tom smiled. "They learn fast," he said. "Soon they will be teaching me instead." Mira returned his smile. "That is what a true teacher does. You have given them more than lessons. You have given them courage." Tom nodded quietly. "And they have given me peace. I never thought I'd find a home so far from my own." They stood together, watching the young Orin build and create. The dream hall was no longer only a building. It had become a heartbeat for the entire civilization. Later that day, Mira called for a meeting of the council. The elders arrived, their robes flowing with soft light. There was no longer fear or hesitation in their faces. Instead, there was pride. Mira spoke first. "When this human arrived, our world was calm but empty. We had lost the meaning of creation. Now look around us. Our people sing again. They explore again. They live again." Rain, the eldest of the council, nodded. "You were right, Mira. Change was not something to fear. The balance we once guarded so carefully has become stronger because of movement. Stillness can only last when it learns to flow." Another elder smiled gently. "And we must thank the human for this. He reminded us that imperfection is not weakness but possibility." Tom bowed his head humbly. "You thank me, but I only reminded you of what you already had inside. You had forgotten how to wonder, and I only helped you remember." The council members smiled, and Mira looked at him with warmth in her eyes. "Your words will remain in our memory for generations," she said. But Tom's expression grew thoughtful. He looked out through the glass walls at the twin suns and the endless sky. "It is almost time for me to leave," he said softly. Mira turned toward him, surprised. "Leave?" "My ship is repaired," Tom said. "Your engineers helped me rebuild it. I must return to the stars and tell others what I found here. I came to your world by accident, but I cannot stay forever." The room grew quiet. Even the elders seemed saddened by his words. Mira felt a heaviness in her heart. She knew he was right. Yet the thought of his departure felt like losing a part of their world. That night, the city held a great gathering under the twin moons. The citizens filled the gardens and bridges with light. Music flowed through the air like a living current. The Orin came together to celebrate not an ending, but a new beginning. Tom stood among them, surrounded by smiles and laughter. Children brought him small gifts, a glowing crystal bird, a bracelet made of starlight threads, and a sketch of his glider drawn by young hands. Each gift was simple but filled with meaning. When it was time for him to speak, the city fell silent. The lights dimmed slightly, leaving the moons to cast a soft silver glow. Tom looked around at the faces of the Orin, at the city that now shimmered with life. "When I first came here," he said, "I saw a world that had forgotten how to move. You had everything, yet you had lost the joy of reaching for more. But look at you now. You have found a new kind of perfection, one that breathes, one that grows. You reminded me too that peace and curiosity can live together. I will carry that lesson wherever I go." Mira stepped forward. "And we will carry yours. You have shown us that hope lives in every question, and that trying is its own kind of wisdom." The crowd began to hum a soft melody, a song created from both Orin and human sounds. The notes rose and fell like waves. It was the first song ever sung for both species, a harmony between curiosity and calm. The next morning, the twin suns rose higher than ever, painting the horizon in gold. Tom stood beside his repaired ship, its surface gleaming with a mix of human metal and Orin crystal. The design was unlike anything seen before, a symbol of their unity. Mira and several council members came to see him off. The moment felt both joyful and tender. "I will miss this world," Tom said quietly. "It feels like home." Mira looked at him with a gentle smile. "It will always be your home. The stars will carry your name and the rivers will remember your steps. You changed our destiny." Tom held out a small object, a wooden model of his first glider, the one that had started it all. "This belongs to you," he said. "It reminds me that even the smallest creation can change everything." Mira accepted it, her eyes soft with emotion. "And this belongs to you," she said, handing him a pendant shaped like a tiny crystal sun. "It carries the light of our world. May it guide you wherever you go." Tom placed the pendant around his neck. The glow of the crystal reflected in his eyes. "Thank you, Mira, for trusting me, for letting a stranger be part of your story." She took a small step closer. "You were never a stranger. You were the answer we did not know we needed." The ship's energy began to hum softly, filling the air with light. The citizens of Orion gathered around the valley, watching in silence. As the engines brightened, Tom turned one last time and waved. The crowd lifted their hands in farewell. The ship rose slowly into the sky, its reflection dancing on the crystal towers. It climbed higher and higher until it was a small silver spark against the morning light. Then it vanished among the stars. Mira stood still for a long moment, her pendant glowing softly in her hand. The wind moved gently through her hair. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you." In the days that followed, life in Orion continued. But something new lingered in the air, a spirit of hope that could not fade. The Dream Hall expanded and new learning centers were built across the planet. The Orin began to explore the skies again, designing small ships inspired by Tom's craft. They called them Wings of Discovery. Everywhere one looked, there were signs of renewal. The gardens grew brighter, the towers shone with new designs, and the people smiled more freely. The balance between logic and wonder had been restored. Mira often visited the balcony of the Hall of Unity at night. She would look up at the stars and wonder where Tom had gone. Sometimes she thought she saw a tiny glimmer moving across the darkness, and she liked to imagine it was his ship, carrying their story to new worlds. One evening, she placed the small wooden glider on her desk beside the pendant he had given her. She whispered softly, "He taught us to dream, and now our dreams will reach beyond the stars." Years later, when young Orin asked their teachers about the human who came from the sky, they were told a story about a traveler who arrived by chance but changed everything with kindness and curiosity. They were told how Mira, their wise leader, had chosen to listen to him when others doubted, and how that choice had shaped the future of their entire world. Every generation that followed carried that lesson, that even a single spark of wonder could light an entire civilization. And so, under the twin suns of Orion, life continued, not in stillness but in motion. The rivers of light flowed brighter than ever, carrying the song of creation through every corner of the world. Above them, among the stars, a single ship drifted onward. Inside it, a human looked out at the endless sky, the pendant around his neck glowing softly. He smiled, thinking of a world of crystal towers and kind hearts. He whispered to himself, "She chose a human to shape the future of her people." And far below, on Orion, Mira looked up at the same stars and whispered, "And he chose to remind us how to dream."